gifts are everywhere, aren't they? One of the, before I really launch today, one of the recent gifts that in my life has been an opportunity to get to know a gentleman named Casey who has a company called Quiddle here in town, if you've heard of him. And they create he creates videos for folks about what they're doing in the world and what they're bringing to the world. And so he's working on one for us. And so you're going to see him today floating around a little bit. We're going to change our closing song this morning because we think that singing, when we did our membership Sunday a few weeks ago and we were singing with each other and to each other, you are the face of God and I hold you in my heart, that is very reflective of who we are, and he needs a good recording of that. So we're going to do all that, to do that together at the end of service today, if that's all right with all of you. Yeah? All right. So he's also going to interview some of you individually probably today also. So, anyway, 3 times with me. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. So it's almost here. Is everybody ready? Everybody's got everything ready? I've been freaking out for the last few days about getting everything ready. And again, like I said earlier, it's like, I know that it always comes together. And isn't that such a great thing in life? Like, we get so caught up in the busyness sometimes, and yet we know always that it's always going to come together. And it will be good, whatever it is. So we have been traveling this last few weeks with the story, the biblical Christmas story, and taking a kind of a closer look at little pieces of it around the idea of Advent. And this week is the week of joy, which is pretty easy, isn't it? But for me, it's a word I have trouble using without hearing Ren and Stimpy in the back of my head going, happy, joy, joy. So that gets confusing. But of course, this is a solemn holiday talk. So in the Old Testament, which is also known as the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Isaiah, it was written, "For unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, I've heard that verse before, but Old Testament, really? Is that possible? And yes, you would be right. It is Old Testament, which was way before. Way before. The thing to remember, again, because we've been looking at all of this story from partially its metaphysical standpoint places, from its historical places, from the language of the time, and from how people lived in the time. And this part of the story, which was written way before the story, what happens because the people who wrote the Gospels, as we know, wrote them hundreds of years after the death of the man Jesus. And they were Hebrew scholars who were supposed to make the stories match. Which doesn't diminish the story, though. It's just a good thing to remember. It doesn't diminish the story or how it continues to inspire us or how it continues to bring something to us that we can use in our lives today and every day. It's just, I don't know, we do talk about the history of all of that, so we have that from Isaiah. And from the New Testament we have, "And the angel said to them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy." Which, happy, joy, joy. I bring you, that's not in there. "Bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all my people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord." Now, we spoke extensively a couple weeks ago about that fear not, bring your gift into the world, and Mary's willingness to say yes to bringing her gifts into the world, and even in a scary place. And now we have, I bring you tidings of great joy. And in John, we have a related verse, and I know at first you're going to go, really, is that related? But I promise you it'll relate. But in John, we have probably the most famous verse ever. For God so loved the world, he gave his only son so that we may have everlasting life. Now, historically, the movement from Old Testament Hebrew Bible thinking to the new one was a movement from strict, very orthodox doctrinal rule making and how we're going to live our lives. And it had become, people had become very sort of cold about that. And so the movement into New Testament was a movement from love into law. And that was part of this whole birth story, is this movement from love into law. And it's also important in this context to remember that in Jewish tradition, there is not a lot of focus on the afterlife. There is a lot of focus on how we are and how we be now. And how we be here now, and what we're doing in the world, and how we're bringing good into the world. There's not a lot of talk about what might happen after. So the birth of the child Jesus represents a shift in thinking about life as a limited experience with a set of rules to one of an eternal afterlife with this promise of knowing God personally and bringing that back into the story. The birth then, so we talk about the birth of the man Jesus as this being bringing this new idea into the world, even though it is important to remember that he was Jewish and he was trying to reform Judaism in his own way. And then the birth of this idea of Christ consciousness, which is who he became and what he represents in terms of our life and what we are able to connect with and become in those moments of willingness. And so it became this, from rules to knowing God personally, and then living in the idea that life is endless and ongoing, and has that, and this was way before quantum physics and science were telling us that energy doesn't die, and that there is this possibility that there's this energy that continues. And as far as I'm concerned, science just kind of catching up with all the spiritualness of it all. But that was a really big shift in thinking if you think about, mass thinking. And then we have this phrase, and God so loved. And God so loved the world that he gave. Now, the thing about the Bible is to take it and not limit it to that time and space. If God loved, then God loves. If God gave, then God gives. It was not like one person, one time. It is God gives. There is this givingness to the spirit and nature of God that is ongoing and part of our life when we are willing to accept it as part of our life. When people were ready to receive this idea, this new message, and consciously, in the greater consciousness of the community, they were ready to move into a space of saying that life is bigger than what we have been living it. Then there was this God gave an example, someone to grow into his own consciousness in such a way that he was able to bring a new idea of who we could be and how we could be and how personally connected and knowing of our oneness with God we could be. And to hand it to us in such a way that we could learn it. And that message, it's been changed and moved, and sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's been used in ways that are not so positive. And what we can know is that message was one of love, of givingness, of kindness and compassion, because it came in the form of child, of such total innocence and pure love. And not just the child Jesus, every child, when you look in their eyes, when you see a baby, do you see nothing but joy? I mean, really, it's such a great example. Our children are such great examples of this idea of love made manifest. And that same idea is born within us every time we choose to say yes to it, and every time we listen within, and every time we go to that place within us where we know in that deepest part of ourselves, that place we travel to from our head to our heart, truly. And we go, oh, I remember who I am, and I remember who you are. in total innocence and without all that judgment. And when you act from that awareness, and when we act from that awareness, expressing His love and abundance and peace in the world, you bring the truth of all of that Christ consciousness right here, right now. And then, frankly, this whole joy thing, it's really easy. It becomes really easy. You find joy in everything. And that's what we get to do. Now, of course, when I think of joy this time of year, I think of watching the anticipation of Santa. Really. If you think about this, the whole Santa thing, it is all about believing. It is about believing absolutely in joy and expectation, and it is believing that no matter what I did this year, good or bad, it's all erased in this moment because Santa said I did all right. And we can let go of any doubt. Our kids, they let go of any doubt on Christmas morning that they did anything wrong all year. Isn't that awesome? What a way to go into the new year and just find joy and expectation and knowing that they deserve that. Watch it differently this year. Even if you don't have kids around you at home, there's lots of specials on TV. You can find them on every channel practically right now. But thinking about this and contemplating that joy and that all of that in the midst of being in reality about hunger, which we've been working with and contributing to the removal of, and sadness and loneliness and loss. And all of those things that we experience during the holidays, there is so much emotion at this time of year. And so I was thinking about that and thinking about how that works with all this joy and how that works with all that expectation. And I had one of those questions, and is being a grown-up blocking my joy? Is being just too much of a grown-up sometimes blocking my joy? And what does that mean? Does it mean, finding some childlike wonder and innocence within ourselves so that we can experience that joy? And how do I find that Santa joy? How do I find Santa joy? And then so I was reading and sitting in this question and I read this excerpt from a book called Into the Wild, which I don't know about. But this was so perfect, I just wanted to share it with you. The writer, it sounds like is writing to a younger, or talking to a younger person. He says, don't settle down and sit in one place. Move around, be nomadic, make each day a new horizon. You're still going to live a long time, and it would be a shame if you did not take the opportunity to revolutionize your life and move into an entirely new realm of experience. You are wrong if you think joy emanates only or principally from human relationships. God has placed it all around us. It is in everything and anything we might experience. We just have to have the courage to turn against our habitual lifestyle and engage in unconventional thinking. My point is that you do not need anyone else around you to bring this new kind of light into your life. It is simply waiting out there for you to grasp it, and all you have to do is reach for it. The only person you are fighting is yourself and your stubbornness to engage in new circumstances. And we've talked about that a lot when we are buried in our own circumstances and the circumstances that are making us unhappy. And we never look up from that. It is impossible to see anything else. But when we occasionally rise up and look and reach out and say, there is joy within me, there is wonder around me, and I can experience that. It doesn't mean that I'm hiding my head in the sand about anything. It just means that I can bring light to it, whatever it is. Reach within and remember the spirit of Christmas, which travels with us all year long and can travel with us, is the spirit of that Christ consciousness which lives with us, that says that we are one with each other and one with God. So reach out reach out, move your body, stand in the sun. We're talking this summer. Stand in the sun and spread your arms and just go, all right, what is mine? There's a gift in this moment. It is mine to give. What is it? And then give a little more and dig in. Experience the wonder of the abundance of your life by sharing the good that you share. Whatever it is. And there are so many ways to do that, without being locked into the exchange. Our habitual thinking says, oh, if I'm going to give, I got to write a check. I don't have any money. What am I going to do? No, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. It says we look at it a little bit differently. And I'm going to use Denise as an example here because she looked at it a little bit differently and said, how can I bring good with what I do every day? And so she knows that people usually bring her in. She's a massage therapist. They bring her lots of cookies and lots of candy at Christmas, and that's really wonderful. And this year she said, please bring me peanut butter. Please bring me jars of peanut butter instead. And so she made 100. Yeah. She reached 100. While I was there the other day, I got to have a massage. Oh, thank you. I got to have a massage the other day. And I walked in, there was a box that had empty spaces in it. And we went in and had my massage, and I came back out, and the box was full. And I kind of looked at her, she's like, I opened the door, and there were 3 jars on the porch. I don't know where they came from. And then we talked about her changing her prices to, whatever she charges plus a jar of peanut butter. So it doesn't, but that's the thing. It doesn't all have to be you doing everything. It has to be you being a place of being willing to receive and to give and create some flow in the world. So she probably does, 10, 15, 20, 40 massages? I don't know how many massages you can do in a week. 20 massages a week. That's 20 people that she can touch every single week outside of herself, and creating that greater magnificent life for everyone around us. And I want to close today with a story that I heard from my friend Jack. And he said, he went to visit some friends of his, and he noticed in their tree, and isn't this beautiful? If you haven't been here for a bit, all of these balls, when we purchased our building this month, I asked everybody to write their gift to community on one of these and to hang it on the tree. And if you weren't here for that, there are some here. Please add yours. Please add yours. But anyway, he noticed at his friend Mike's house that there was a little envelope stuck in the Christmas tree. He happened to be there on Christmas morning, and he didn't know what that was. So he just kind of decided to wait and watch and see. Because he knew that his friend Mike didn't used to like Christmas so much. He liked Christmas for the real things about Christmas, but he was really discouraged by the commercialism of it, and that, everything shows up right after Halloween now. And he was kind of just not into it. And his wife was really frustrated. She didn't know what to do anymore. She was like, I'm constantly getting him ties, I get him these gifts. He's just not that engaged in the gifts I give him. And so then they were at their son's wrestling match, and it was, one of those, it was a wrestling match that was sort of a chance for this little school for underprivileged kids to come and wrestle. And she said she noticed the difference. She could really see the difference between the uniforms and the shoes, and she noticed that these kids from this other school were primarily wrestling without even headgear. And she had this flash of inspiration that she followed. And so she went the next week to a store, and she bought all kinds of stuff for wrestlers, and she sent it anonymously to this school. And now on the flip side, I try to imagine working in a school like that and receiving this and working with these kids and opening this box and having these kids see just a completely different way of being for themselves. But what she did was then she wrote this story down and put it in an envelope and put it in the tree for her husband. And so on Christmas morning, they're doing the thing, and they're doing all the presents, and they're doing the thing, and Santa was there, and at the end of it, she handed him this envelope, which left him speechless and in tears, and their kids just stunned. So this became their tradition every year, And and he said that what he learned from her later was that, you know, they would do the whole Christmas